How's Summit going so far? Good. Glad to hear that. Thanks again. Oh, there we go. Thanks again for being here. My name is Cameron White. I'm a senior partner at NewSchools, and I'm really excited for the conversation today. Before we get into it, wanted to just learn a little bit more about who's in the room with us today. Would you mind raising your hand if you identify as an educator? Great. How about a solution developer? Awesome. What about researcher? Yes. Okay. And how about funders? Cool. So we got all the people we need in the room to solve this, guys. And we're going to have a couple moments for you to, throughout the session, for you to bring your voice into the conversation. We're going to start out here. We really like word clouds today, you might have heard, with a word cloud. And let's see if we can get this going. Yeah, there's a QR code. I'd love to ask you to scan this QR code and to start off by sharing one word that comes up for you when you think about EdTech quality. Yep. Yeah, you guys can't see that, can you?
I can see a big word there, yeah.
I'm seeing words like inconsistent, mixed, disjointed, but also words like motivating, evidence-centered.
Is there a profanity filter?
Is there profanity? I'm not sure. I don't know. There might be.
Let's find out.
So thanks for participating in this. Really resonates, I think, with the emerging narrative that I think, especially in this moment, we're thinking a lot about, that EdTech isn't working. And it's not hard to see where that's coming from. The U.S. schools are spending $30 billion a year on technology. That number is expected to double in the next decade. And yet they have very little to show for it when it comes to student engagement and student outcomes. And we also know that most of the tools that are being used in classrooms are not purpose-built for education, and most of them lack evidence. So those are the headlines, but there's also more to the story. We know that the students who stand to benefit the most from these technologies, students in low-income communities, are the most likely to experience low-quality EdTech use. So we're talking about too much screen time focused on lower order tasks that are not connected to the things that they need most. So when we, on the other hand, there's evidence that technology can work when it's aligned with pedagogy and research, right? So the question isn't, does EdTech work or not? It's about what can we do to close the gap between EdTech's potential and what's happening in most classrooms right now. And we see at least 3 opportunities that we think are really important to talk more about. The first is around increasing the amount of R&D and evaluation in early stage education product development. The second is around increasing the focus on coherence and implementation. And the third is around better aligning decision-making around purchasing with the evidence about what works. And I'm really excited that we have the perfect group of folks to help us explore this today. And you're gonna get to hear from these panelists in just one moment. But we have Katie Boody Adorno, co-founder and CEO of LeanLab, who's thinking really deeply about building the research infrastructure for early stage product development. We have Dacia, co-CEO of Course Mojo, who's thinking a lot about implementation and teacher support for the solutions she's developing. And we have Jasmine Walker, the Director of District Engagement at the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting, who's thinking really deeply about new models of procurement that are doing a better job of aligning our incentives. So as we transition over to our introductions, I'd love for each of you to share just a little bit more about the work you're doing. And also, what do people miss or get wrong when it comes to this question of how to close the EdTech evidence gap? We can start with you, Dacia.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. So we, at Course Mojo, we're trying to improve reading achievement. Specifically, we focused on middle school. So everybody in this room probably knows 8th grade NAEP scores are at the lowest point they've been in 30 years. And kids, even if we get all of the foundational skills right, they then hit this comprehension wall. And the texts get a lot more complex, the writing demands get greater, and unfortunately, achievement slides. So we are embedding AI supports for kids and teachers in the high quality instructional materials. The best thing about what we're doing, the hardest thing, is that we're taking the handful of the top rated curricula that a lot of schools have adopted, and that's what we're focused on. We figure out the hardest thinking part of every lesson, and then as a student said, it's like the handout is talking to me. And so kids work together in partners in small groups doing close reading. The teacher has a live dashboard that shows every kid's level of understanding on every question. And then on the teacher side, what we're trying to do is help all teachers to execute the moves of the most effective teachers. And so we want them running around the classroom, reading over kids' shoulders, figuring out what they know, what they don't know, conferencing with individual kids, giving bite-sized feedback, simultaneously figuring out the class-wide trend. And I used to have the honor of running schools. It's not that I never saw it happen, but it's hard. And so now Mojo basically shows you which kids need help and what they need help with. We're not trying to in any way replace the teacher, but focus them and have them be more strategic in that moment. You push a button, it tells you the 2 biggest misconceptions in your class, helps you pull exemplary student work, a set of things that we'd want teachers to do. So what I think, the 2 things I think folks get wrong is one, and the room may be filled with EdTech skeptics. I was one and still am one. I think EdTech has been designed to be a silent, solo, supplemental. And I think, one, we do know that coherence matters. We do know that this bet on high quality instructional materials in particular is something is necessary, but not sufficient, I would argue, but very necessary. And so to build these standalone products that don't honor what we know about what's happening in the core, I think is wrong. The other thing is people always talk about our product. We think of our product as what is actually implemented in the classroom. So it's the combination of the isolated, but then the implementation sort of strategy and belief. So thinking about both together.
Great. As said, my name's Katie Boody Adorno. I lead a innovative R&D nonprofit called LeanLab Education. And what we do is we believe that the future of education should be built by, for, and with those most impacted. So families, educators, students. Functionally, what that means is we design what we call co-design product research. So we have a network of innovative school communities that have raised their hand and said, we want to be part of co-developing and evaluating or researching tools. And then we pair them with emergent technologies. So a lot of our work these last couple of years have been in AI with many of the tools and companies in the room and some of the districts as well. And we facilitate those connections and help them run rapid R&D sprints to improve product based on teacher and student feedback, and then evaluate to what extent they work. A big misconception I want to name here, or something that we want to consider for this conversation, is that there's this perception that research has to be an expensive, long RCT that's really rigorous and really slow and may not keep pace with how tech is moving, especially in the age of AI. And our goal at LeanLab is to break that conception, saying we can do research at the speed of tech. We can do so in a way that is inclusive of what real educators and teachers actually need. And we can set a new standard of expectation for what educators should expect to be true about the evidence base and reliability of the tools that enter their classroom. So huge fans of all of my co-panelists on this stage. I think Dacia's a beautiful model of what it means to design with evidence and with humans in mind in the classroom. And you'll hear more about, I won't give it away, outcomes-based contracting, which is a beautiful lever of accountability. So the other thing I would say too is, as educators, I believe, and my background as a middle school math teacher and instructional coach and leader, is that we can and we should expect a certain level of efficacy and responsiveness from the tools we put in front of our kids, and partnership from the developers we're working with and products we're working with. So I'll leave it with that and pass it on.
All right, thanks, Katie, for handing it over to me. I get to talk about the sexy thing, which is procurement, or AKA purchasing, right? So my name is Jasmine Walker. I work at the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting. And what we do is the work that we lead is around using procurement as a lever to incentivize innovation, support implementation with integrity, and also to tie that purchase to meaningful results for students. Something that I think that we get wrong is that, and I say we haven't been having the right conversation. As a former district leader, I was guilty. I was looking at all the bells and whistles. I'm like, ooh, but what was missing from the conversation was, what do we want to happen for kids? What is our investment going to do for children? Instead of buying products and services, actually buying what matters the most, which we know is those meaningful outcomes. And the other thing that I think we often get wrong when it comes to contracts is we sign on a dotted line, we cross our fingers, and we hope for the best. In order to do this work, in order to show meaningful outcomes for kids, we have to focus on implementation. Implementation is what matters. It is what is going to drive the outcomes that we're looking for. I won't go too far into implementation because I know Dacia is going to talk about that earlier, but I just want to echo that implementation matters the most when we talk about partnering to impact outcomes for children.
Awesome. Thank you all three. And we also have a QR code here if you want to ask questions during the session, so feel free to submit your questions. I need to move over the mince meter. Give me 1 second, actually. All right, I think that'll work for you now. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the pace of innovation in technology right now, and also the volume of innovation. There's just so much going on. At the same time, we're at this moment where ESSER is fully winded down, and there's this general desire to pull back from so many different things. And so there's this real moment of reckoning. Dacia, how are you seeing the market right now? Do you agree with this view that we have too much EdTech and not enough impact?
Yes. Working very hard not to be part of that problem. But I think it's been decades of over-promising and under-delivering, and I think there's healthy skepticism. And it's simultaneously true that AI is amazingly powerful, more and more so every day. We took this from someone, but refer to it internally like electricity. Like, we can now build something much more powerful. In my opinion, a lot of the products are sort of general purpose products where they're putting a user interface on top of a large language model and asking the AI, I think, to do more than it's actually able to do in this moment, if the bar, which I know exists in this room, is like a level of quality, excellence, and impact. And so I think the specialized products are going to outperform the general products. In our case, we are going deep on ELA and only in specific grade levels and only aligned to certain HQIM. I don't know if we have any venture capitalists in the room, but they don't particularly like that as a business model, I will just say. You're supposed to go after the biggest total addressable market and sell. And I've been at this long enough and am older than I may look, or maybe I look as old as I am, you all decide. But I'm just at a point in my career where I just don't want to do that. I only want to go after the things that I think are going to have substantial impact. And however, I don't think we have a lot of examples in K-12 of quality, impact-oriented decision-making. One exception might be the ed reports and the rating of products that was so transparent. And I think there you saw major shifts backed by states to adopt higher quality curricula. I am literally begging anybody in this room to stand up and ed reports for EdTech, because I think what I'm afraid we're going to get wrong in this moment is that we're not going to shape the market. And I think if there are school leaders in this room, your inbox has a tsunami of AI-powered EdTech products generated now by AI-powered marketing. It's like just a nightmare. And it is so hard to differentiate. And so what we do is somebody who had the pleasure of running schools for a long time, we go on word of mouth. And I still think that may be the only reliable way to do it is you're like, what do you see that's actually good? But it's not as good as what would actually be an independent validation of it. The other thing we try to go for is outcomes and research and evidence. And so we made a very clear choice early on for the first, we're only really 2.5, 3 years into this journey. I was effectively the only salesperson at the company. We did not actually invest in, you could argue this was not a good decision, but instead we spent on research. And we have 2 independent efficacy studies at the ESSA Tier 2 level. And people say it might be, we're going after that laborious RCT next year and have multiple other studies going actively right now because we hope that will be a differentiator. I worry, absent outcomes-based contracts and absent some kind of reports for EdTech, I'm hoping outcomes are going to matter, but even that has trouble breaking through the noise. So I think there needs to be other efforts alongside.
Thanks. So you mentioned this idea that it's really hard to break through from the perspective of a solution developer, and that potentially building evidence might be a way to stand out in a crowded market. Jasmine, I'm wondering what you're seeing from the purchaser side. How are they making sense of all this noise?
Yeah, and Dacia said something that really resonated with me. Like, how are we going to shape the market? And it takes an ecosystem to do it. It takes everybody in this room. It takes the buyer being able to have things in place, such as an outcomes-based contract, to make those quicker decisions around what do I start? What do I stop? What do I continue? Because the evidence is just not there. They're making purchases blindly. And what we're starting to see out in the field with the buyers is that now that ESSER is gone, they have a lot less, and the need to meet the student needs are still there. So they're trying to make these trade-offs and make decisions around which students need the most, where are those opportunities that we can funnel our resources toward those areas. So we're starting to see traction pick up for outcomes-based contracting because districts really want to know, state education agencies really want to know, is what we're investing in actually moving the needle for children. So we're, like I said, we're seeing it pick up at the state where we are national. So it's moving, across the states from the East Coast, West Coast, up north, down south. We're everywhere, small districts, large districts, and people really wanting to answer the question, like, what just happened? Like, did this actually work for our students? Constituents are asking the question, how are these dollars being used? I can remember being in a board meeting one day. It was around the time we were having our math adoption. At the time, I was the director of K-12 math, and I sat in the back because, I wanted to hear what the board was saying. And I was sitting next to a parent, and the parent was like, who is spending all of this money? I mean, like, who's the person? Who made these decisions? Where are our dollars going? And I sat there in my seat like this the whole time because those decisions were mine. Something else Dacia mentioned earlier, like, districts are spending a lot. I had a whiteboard in my office, and my colleague Brittany Miller's in the back. She came to visit me when I was still in the district, and I literally had a whiteboard that had a list of about 20 to 25 EdTech products that were being used in K-12 mathematics. But if you looked at my data, our data, across the past 5 years, I couldn't tell you what impact there was on student outcomes. Because looking at that data, there was none. I didn't see it. When I was introduced to outcomes-based contracting, the first thing I said was, why haven't we been doing this all along? They do it in other industries. Why is education so different? When I talked to, I did my first outcomes-based contract. It was great, by the way. Tying those services to those payments to outcomes, it changed. There was that spillover effect. It impacted the way that I started talking to every provider that I partnered with, because the conversation became about what matters the most. What are we going to do for kids? What do you need me to do? What do you need us to do on the district side to create those enabling factors that are going to allow your product to do what it was designed to do? What are you going to do to support us so we can work as true partners, shifting away from that transactional relationship, signing on the dotted line, crossing my fingers, hoping for the best. So that's the traction that we're starting to see in districts. They really want to know, what are we doing for kids? They want to see the evidence. I'm going to be honest, they don't have time to wait for the RCT. They need to know now.
And Jasmine, do you mind just sharing like a headline of how you define outcomes-based contracting, just in case folks aren't familiar with it?
Oh yeah, I can give you my elevator speech. So when it comes to outcomes-based contracting, what it is a type of contract that allows a significant portion of that contract to be tied to those student outcomes. In that contract, you agree to what those outcomes are going to be prior to signing on that dotted line. As partners, you also agree to what the roles and responsibilities are and codify it in the contract. Because guess what? If it's not in the contract, it's not going to happen. And using that contract, I like to joke and say it's a lesson plan because that's what it truly feels like. But using the contract to actually drive the implementation and then setting up that contract in a way that it incentivizes innovation of the provider. So what I love most about it is it creates that mutual accountability where before the district just took on all the risks. They paid, hope for the best, right? Now that responsibility is shared. When the students win, everybody wins.
Thank you. Katie, you talked a little bit about the disconnect between traditional research and the speed that technology development moves. Can you say a little bit more about what gaps are you seeing and how are you designing supports for early stage developers to collect more evidence sooner?
Sure. Yeah. So, Jasmine's exactly right. The reality is, especially in the age of AI, especially when we're experiencing rightfully earned skepticism and fear around these tools, we can't wait for millions of dollars of multi-year research to come out. We have to figure out how to get students and teachers and parents answers now. So what we've been working on is we kind of have been living by the mantra research at the speed of tech. And what that functionally means is how do we build underlying infrastructure that can help accelerate how we generate insights. So one thing that means I mentioned before is a network of schools. We have some in the room, Dream and Innovate and others who have raised their hand and said we're willing to partner in R&D through a participatory approach where our insights can actually contribute to the development and we get those insights a little bit faster than if we were to wait to publish through a peer-reviewed paper or journal, for instance. So we have that network and the goal is to speed up recruitment time for participants. We also have been experimenting with a more gated approach, and what that means, we just did a cohort of math tutoring tools with NewSchools, funded by the Gates Foundation, where we worked with 7 tools, and they went through initially a rapid experimental process where we were evaluating just the basic safety, security, fairness, equity, and pedagogical alignment of these tools using really quick processes. So we use an LLM as a judge evaluation process where AI could actually grade the AI. And then our researchers have developed a tool called a research ready audit where they can demo the tool as a teacher or a student and again grade it and see understand to what extent this tool has been based on a pre-existing evidence base, how interoperable it is, how easy to use is it. And that can function at least as a first gate that we can run quickly within weeks to understand is this tool safe and evidence-based to use in the classroom. The second approach we're using is something called a rapid cycle evaluation. This is typically for products that are evolving really quickly that may not have that reliability and stability of use in a classroom yet, and oftentimes don't have the implementation or dosage information necessary to really be used in a long-term sustainable way that might generate the outcomes we want to see. So what this approach looks like is we're deploying the tool in a classroom through typically 3 cycles over 8 to 12 weeks. And in those cycles, teachers are giving ongoing feedback around curriculum coherence, again, usability, teacher insights. One thing we've heard a lot about is that these tools oftentimes don't give teachers actionable insights to actually influence their practice in the room. And so we're working hand in hand with the developers to surface those insights, make changes really quickly so that when they redeploy, we see improvement in the classroom. And then last but not least, we're looking at the more rigorous impact studies. And we're experimenting with how we can even do that in a more efficient, more cost-friendly way. So we'll look at pre and post assessments, often using things that are native to the school environment like iReady or NWEA, layering on top of that surveys that are measuring other early indicators like motivation, engagement, persistence, that tell us if a kid is on track to learning. And so in a quick period of time, 3 to 4 months, we can see to what extent are we seeing the needle move for kids? And our hope is that in functionally 1 year, we can move a product from essentially being a purely experimental to having some real evidence base and have actually meaningfully improved for the classrooms they're actually working in. So that's what we're working on right now. I think what we're missing in the sector are still these incentives. So philanthropy has been huge in helping us get to proof of concept. We still need to leverage things like outcomes-based contracting and continue to generate more market signals, to Dacia's point, to like say, how do we shout from a rooftop when a tool is meeting our standards of excellence and efficacy.
Awesome. So we got a chance to talk about the importance of generating evidence sooner. So speaking of experimenting, we're going to do a little experiment here. We're going to give you 1 minute to turn to a neighbor and talk about what you just heard. What's a takeaway you had? In exchange for that, when we get to the end of that minute, I'm going to count down. If you could please come back together, we'll see if it works. Okay? You have a minute to introduce yourself to your neighbor and share one thing that you took away from that part of the conversation about generating evidence sooner. All right, let's try it out. Okay, friends, let's come back together in 3, 2, 1. Let's come back together. We got it. It's good. We got it. Let's just lay ahead. Okay, let's do that. All right. I love it. The fourth wall is broken. All the voices are in the space. That was the point. We're going to do that again a couple more times. Hopefully that was fun to meet your neighbor and talk a little bit about what we were talking about up here. But let's keep the conversation going. So we talked a little bit about the importance of generating evidence sooner. And we know just because something has evidence, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in your particular context. We need to talk more about implementation. So Dacia, you talked a little bit about you're leading an early stage organization, a resource constrained environment, you're juggling these trade-offs. You decided to invest a lot in implementation early on. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking there and how you weighed that versus other potential ways that you could be focused?
Yeah, I feel like I'm talking to a room of people who are deeply grounded in what's actually happening in schools. If you're deeply grounded in what's happening in schools, then you know you need to invest in implementation. But we also have a number of outcomes-based contracts. In fact, Adam is our OBC coach in the room. And I think if you're really committed to outcomes, I would argue in a formal way where, just to be clear, as the EdTech provider, you only get paid half upfront. Something like that. Half of your license fee is actually tied to outcomes. In our case, we normally say to the district, what are you accountable for? We work in tested grades and subjects. State tests are imperfect, but they are decent measures of whether kids are actually, particularly if you look at growth. And so if they're accountable for growth and absolute proficiency, then those are exactly the goals for which. And so if you are actually on the hook for outcomes, again, whether it's formalized into a contract, which I would recommend, or it's more the spirit of your partnership. And I do believe in this market, when there are very few resources and way too many products, I think this is going to end up being a differentiator in terms of what people are willing to spend on. So again, whether it's formal or informal, then you have to care about implementation. Because we are believers in like what's actually going to drive reading achievement is a combination of HQIM, ideally thoughtfully deployed tech, but then critically important teacher skill. Then we have worked hard. I see Teaching Lab in the room. We've worked with instruction partners and others. Like, you have to care about the PL that's happening. And if you're committed to the outcomes, then you're looking to make sure all of the levers are lined up together to ultimately, so we end up working with the PL providers to ensure that you're not being trained and coached on your curriculum and then trained and coached on your EdTech tool. You're being trained and coached on an AI-powered version of your curriculum. And so I think it brings in all of those things into it. But I will just say, if you look at, I think it's very interesting to ask a provider that you're talking to, tell me about the distribution of your costs internally across several functions. When I was the one salesperson, we had 4 people on the school success team that were working in the field with schools on implementation and critically on feedback. I mean, almost everything in our product is tied directly to a teacher from this school or this district gave us this idea or told us this was frustrating. And if you really pay attention and listen carefully, it is your product roadmap in terms of the kinds of problems that are most important for you to solve. But you don't get that in a survey. You get that by being in the back of their classroom and saying, what are you trying to do right now that you're not able to do?
Yeah, Dacia, thank you for lifting that up. And again, I echo it again, implementation, I can't say it enough, is so important. When we think about what teachers do, they plan for instruction. So you have to plan for that implementation the same way that teachers in the classroom plan for instruction. Dacia already named in the contract, they're outlining the roles, responsibility, district, what are you going to do? Provider, what are you going to do? But also within that contract, there's remedies, because we know in every relationship, there's always some bumps, right? So we plan for that too. If student dosage and usage gets off track, what are we going to do as partners to get that dosage back up to where it needs to be? The goal isn't to spend less because students didn't achieve outcomes or they didn't use the platform. The goal is for students to achieve that outcome. So everybody's remaining focused on what we know the main thing is, which is student learning. So having those remedies built in there, and ultimately, if they can't get back on track, then maybe it, impacts that payment, those contingent payments at the end. Another critical piece, which makes that engine run, if you will, is continuous improvement. I know that's a word that we like to throw around, but in an outcomes-based contract, the continuous improvement framework is outlined within the contract. What are the types of meetings that we need to have? How frequent are those meetings? What are we going to be talking about during those meetings? What data needs to be looked at during those meetings? And outlining all of those key pieces that are going to help to continuously improve that implementation, having those feedback loops so that not only is the implementation with the children in those classrooms getting better, but for the provider, when you think about what's in it for me, you're getting that feedback that you need to also improve your product.
Can I just add one I was having this conversation with Jeff at lunch today. So normally in EdTech, the marginal cost of the marginal cost of kids using the product or not is actually quite low. It's not quite zero, but it's like hosting costs on a server. In AI-driven products, that's not true anymore. And particularly if you're using some of the more sophisticated models, every time a student uses the product, there's input and output token costs. And the marginal cost can be quite significant if you have like a daily use product the way we do by all kids and then teachers. And so frankly, already we know we were in a world in which most of the licenses that were purchased for EdTech were actually not used. And it was like part of the whole scam around,
5%
and so
to be exact.
what?
5%.
5% were used, 95% were not used, right? So that was already true. I just want to say now EdTech has an incentive even more, or let me just, there's no reason to lean into usage unless the formal or informal expectation is outcomes, in which case you have a very clear point of view about how often your product has to be used in order to produce outcomes. So I think it's really important at a minimum to be tracking usage and to understand everybody's incentives in that.
And then I love that we're talking about this partnership between developers and school systems and how they're both playing a role. Katie, I know in your model, a big part of it is bringing that educator feedback directly to developers at the earliest stages. What types of feedback are developers getting that are related to these challenges of implementation?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, it's really hard, if not impossible, to write a strong outcomes-based contract if you've not done any R&D on what high-quality implementation or dosage can even look like. So I think bare minimum, as you're working with, a structured research partner is great, but if you can't, being able to start with bare minimum around functionality and ease of use. One thing that we don't see, this might sound very, very basic, but interoperability, single sign-on, getting kids easily rostered onto a system. How can you reduce all friction so that kids can just get on and get to work? I mean, that sounds, I can't overstate that enough because it sounds so simple, but it's very real. And you'll walk into classrooms, I won't name names, all over the country today and see half of a block that was supposed to be used for 15 minutes for an AI-enabled tutor taken up by headphones, right? And volume issues and things like that. So there are some just basic ease of use functionality things that need to be addressed that can be addressed early on. Beyond that, be really mindful of thinking about the workflow of the teacher's day. How am I making this teacher's life easier? This is where a lot of things around coherence come into play. Am I really tapped into their core content? Am I really tapped in how they're using tiered instruction? Is this a tier 1 intervention? Do I need to push into MTSS time? You really need to understand how these teachers and instructional coaches are moving throughout their day. So again, your job is simply to reduce friction. What are all the blocks you can pull out of the way so that these kids can get online, these teachers aren't, having to cognitively manage another thing and really get to the learning. And then once you've overcome those roadblocks, then that's where the fun stuff can kind of really come out around what is the pedagogical richness you can put in place? How are you shifting the cognitive load back onto the student? How are you really providing really engaging scaffold so that the content is easy to understand and you're leveraging the human expertise that's in the room? So I kind of think about it in those that sequential order, but really, again, it's about how do you unlock the brilliance of the humans in the room. That's both for the kids and the educators.
Awesome. So we talked first about generating evidence sooner. Here we're talking about the importance of deepening the focus on implementation and coherence. Let's break that fourth wall again and talk to each other for 1 minute. I'll raise my hand when we get to the minute and we'll go silent that way, okay? Take a minute to talk to each other. What'd you hear? All right, let's start to come back together. Let's start to come back together. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Thanks so much for bringing your perspectives and expertise into this space. So we talked about generating evidence sooner, focusing more on coherence and implementation. But we know even if something has evidence and it's being implemented well, that doesn't always connect to the way that schools and districts are making decisions about what to purchase and what to keep when there's such an environment of constrained resources and needing to make tough decisions about trade-offs. Dacia, I wanted to invite you to talk a little bit more about some of your early pilots, which I think in some ways set a foundation for how you're now thinking about the outcomes-based contract. But what does it look like to start small but have a vision toward a deeper partnership over time using outcomes?
Yeah. So first of all, I just can't say enough about my gratitude for the folks, early folks. I mean, Dream's been mentioned a couple times, but there were a number of folks who took a bet on us early. And you have to do that based on shared values and a shared sort of belief about strong practice. And I love that there are ways of evaluating whether a product is aligned to cognitive science and motivation science and coherence with your HQIM and your vision for what a classroom experience in particular should look like. I have a particular passion about not having silent solo EdTech products or implementation visions. Like, I just think in the age of AI, we need our human skills more than ever. Oral language also precedes written language. Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons why we want kids in general, but in ELA classes in particular, talking to each other. So you have to make the bet based on that. But then our recommendation has always been to start small. Pick a meaningful enough number. I don't like single school pilots because I think for both good and bad, you have a school effect. But I think you easily could start with 2 or 3 schools, maybe even just a single grade, and get as close as you can to setting up an A/B test. Part of how we were able to get efficacy studies really in our first full year of implementation is Sumner County, which the superintendent is presenting in another room as we speak. He had half his middle schools use Mojo, half his middle schools not, all in 6th grade. And then we knew very clearly we were trying to move ELA achievement, and he had his first benchmark in January, and we could already see the momentum. And then we had a state test at the end of the year, and we could do a quasi-experimental match comparison study on a single year of data. And yes, the product changed and evolved. And I think, in the age of AI, if your product is not getting rapidly better, there's actually a problem. But if you're also saying to kids and their parents and their teachers and their school superintendent, we think this is worthy of your time and attention, then you should be accountable for those outcomes and be working obsessively to make that product by the end of the year better. So it's less about there's a certain thing we're evaluating, but you are evaluating the effect of an evolving product in a given period of time. And they saw an 8 percentage point difference when they did that. And Aldine, who's also presenting, saw a 10 percentage point difference. And they did just a handful of schools, pulled out representative of the rest of them. So I think starting small, having a chunky enough number, in one case it was 1,000 kids, in the other case it was like 900. That's enough to be able to get you some good data. And then you scale. And in both cases, then they took the next step, went with more schools, more grades, and they are rigorously evaluating outcomes, and we're obsessively making the product better, and we're partnering with the PL organizations. And now I'm pleased to say both of those districts are going all middle schools, all grades, but that's in year 3. And they're then able, and we haven't talked about screen time yet today, but when you have to stand in front of your community and advocate for an EdTech product, it is a much more, I think, appropriately difficult conversation than it's been in the past. And you really need to know that something is increasing student thinking, not outsourcing student thinking, that is increasing the social experience of learning, not denigrating the social experience of learning. And if you have rigorously piloted something, you have not only hard data, but you have all the qualitative data from kids and teachers to be able to speak to a kind of experience that a parent or educator would want.
Awesome. So Jasmine, we talked a little bit about what outcomes-based contracts are. I think probably some folks are convinced, or like, that makes sense philosophically. Can we kind of talk a little bit more about how it's showing up in the market? Like, how widespread are outcomes-based contracts? What kind of tractions are you seeing with states and districts and being bought into this concept?
Yeah, our work started out 2021 out of CEPR at Harvard. And in the year 2022, there were 5 outcomes-based contracts. Now in year 2025, we are up to 46 outcomes-based contracts. We're in several states across the country, such as California, Texas, my home state, Florida. So we're working at the state level as well as the district level. So we're in about 90 districts right now, implementing with contracts that are implementing outcomes-based contracts, whether it be for high-impact tutoring, EdTech instructional interventions, and curriculum-based professional learning. So the demand is there. Folks are really wanting to understand, like, how is our investment working? I was at another conference yesterday, just down the road at Stanford, and another state approached me and said, hey, how can I do this? We're launching something statewide. We've been doing it, but we need to refine the work that we're doing because we really want to understand if we're moving the needle for children. So it's picking up every day. I tell my colleague, I'm like, I can't have any more. And I don't like to tell people no, but it's really, like I said, it's really taking off. It's a national model. And what we're also starting to see is that people are using their legislation as a lever to be able to support what the expectation is, and using outcomes-based contracting to support that work.
Great. So we talked about gathering evidence sooner, focusing on coherence and implementation, and now the importance of linking outcomes to purchasing decisions. So I want to give you one more chance to turn and talk to your neighbor. What's something you heard that's sticking with you or that you want to take from this conversation?
Look at this. I would say most of the key points I think have gotten. You've done an excellent
All right, let's start to come back together. Yeah, I see a hand going up. Yep. Nice. All right. Thank you guys so much. We're getting close to the end of our time together. I thank you for submitting questions, folks who did. We have time for one of them. I pulled one that I think is a really helpful kind of way to bring this together, because we've talked about a lot of the different stakeholders, but this concept of screen time came up, and we know right now in communities across the country, like this is a really important topic, and so. We talked a lot about how to align with the district. What do you think about aligning with the communities and the families around this technology use thing? And what role does research have to play to make a credible case to communities who are wary of so much screen time?
Yeah, I can jump in. First and foremost, I think we need more transparent R&D tools that demonstrate and communicate to families what the risk is of different products. So like ed reports for EdTech is a dream and should happen. But concretely, what we know right now about the evidence is that there is pushback on screen or tools that are directly giving screen time to kids, right? Chatbots, that kind of tool. However, we are seeing early evidence of efficacy of tools that leverage AI to enhance connection and community in classrooms. So tools like CU Boulder has a suite of tools, one called TalkTree that incentivizes talk. And mathematical discourse in the classroom. We're seeing tools like OCO that do similar things. We're also seeing a lot of tools that are tutor or teacher-facing tools that really help upskill novice educators to become more effective and give them actionable insights that turn data into key moves to enhance instruction. And those things are beneficial. We're seeing early, really promising results. The other functionality we're seeing that's really exciting for accessibility and multilingual learners are multimodal tools. So tools that give kids different ways of drawing or speaking to text or demonstrating their learning that might have been lost if we just solely rely on the traditional, Scantron bubble tests or whatever traditional mechanisms we've had to assess. So I would urge us to think much more expansively about how we think about AI in schools in this age. And we really should, anyway, be trying to get kids off of singular screen experiences and pushing them to deepening their learning and engaging in the classroom. So I would say keep a lookout for those. And we're at a weird time. It's not, I think the urge is to go into binary thinking and black and white and say, let's just ban everything. That's easier than trying to figure this out. But it is here, and it's incumbent upon us to grapple with that and say, what is the world we actually want for our kids, and how do we bend the tech in that direction?
Yeah, I would say I see this as an opportunity just to have a conversation. Like, I'm with you. I wouldn't ban everything, but just having a conversation about, as a former classroom teacher, what are the guidelines and guardrails around the use of this technology piece? And even when it comes to the AI conversation, like, how do we keep the human in the loop? I think way back, and I'm going to date myself, so I won't tell you exactly when or what tool, but I remember when my school, we were implementing a product, and part of the joy that came out of my experience as the classroom teacher and the joy that the students had was not actually interacting on the platform, is what I did with the information I got from the platform afterwards. They looked forward to every Friday when I had that certificate for each of them about what they achieved within the platform, and then what our class achieved outside of that platform. And don't let me be out on Friday, because I would have to leave a note with the sub to let them know that we would have our celebration on Monday. So it's just so important for us to think about what role is the human playing? How can we use the tech tools to elevate what we're already doing in the classroom? I wish I was in the classroom today and had AI available to me, some of these tools available to me. I thought I was great in the classroom then, but I just wonder what I would be doing now.
I don't know, we probably have a lot of parents in the room. If you're a parent, how many of you are concerned about screen time for your own children? Okay, me too. I've got 2 teenage boys, 14, 16. I'm like a constant, I almost hope they get in trouble so I can take their phone. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I'm like, oh, too bad, that's 2 weeks, So I think first, channeling what our standards are for our own kids and having the level of empathy about why families feel this way. It's very hard to control it at home, as much as we all try. And so school is the place where we want kids to go and be able to interact meaningfully with each other. And so just to elevate one thing that Katie said, even now we are fundamentally a Chromebook based or a laptop based. I really wish the hardware could move as fast as the AI software is, because we could just get rid of the screens. Like you could have an Alexa-like, thing that was. But the issue right now is primarily about student voice recognition in a loud classroom. Like really being able to figure out which student is contributing and what they're contributing. So I would just encourage development on the hardware side, and in particular speech recognition, to move as fast as possible, and noise cancellation. It's the combination of those two things that have to come together for us to fundamentally reshape this conversation. And then when screen time concerns have come up regarding our product, you want to be able to be in take the parents or the school board or whomever to go see it. And I think that's where hopefully we have a more nuanced conversation that's not for or against, but it's actually like, let's get very specific about the use cases that we think are important, and how do we make sure in those use cases to dial up student leadership, student discourse, the effective teamwork skills that we need alongside. This is, as much as I care about academic outcomes, and hopefully it's clear, I care a lot about academic outcomes, there are a whole set of other skills that kids need. And we should be developing products that are simultaneously working to develop students on multiple fronts.
Awesome. So we're going to close out with a call to action. We talked a little bit about all the different voices and perspectives represented in the room today. If you had to give advice for one thing that you'd like for folks to do differently walking out of this room to contribute to this project of closing the EdTech impact gap, what would you recommend?
Did somebody just say funding?
You could say that a little louder. You could say that a little louder.
We got one vote for funding. All right, let's keep going.
We need funding for these studies. We went straight out doing controlled studies. They're small samples, and our results are phenomenal, but we don't have enough money to do what, we know we're gonna get statistical significance as soon as we have enough kids.
All right, so we got one vote for money. What else do we got?
Focusing on teacher competence and skill.
Okay. Okay. You guys got anything?
Well, I didn't realize you were joking when she said at first she gets to talk about the sexy stuff of outcomes-based contracting. I'm like, that is sexy. And you were joking, but it's not. I actually, I am cheering. I will just say we didn't get into like a level of specifics about how that works, but because what happens is there's now a variable component. You know how when you have a contract, you like to put it in your budget and know that you have the money. It's very hard to have something that's variable. And then it bridges fiscal years because often the final results come after. So there is some level of complexity here that I think there's a role for philanthropy potentially to take that part. There's certainly a role for states. Like there's some operational issues that are worth, but otherwise I think it is not just sexy, but very important work to be done to figure out how to just align incentives. I think we need more collaborations. Again, the kind of combination of HQIM and PL and AI and tier 1 and tier 2, those kinds of combinations, collaboration should be incentive. And then we have to figure out how to have an outcomes-based framework on a collaboration. That's super complicated, but I think it's worth wrestling with all of that.
Yeah. To add to that too, I think yes, funding for research, but also funding for R&D infrastructure. Like we need more creative ways to engage schools, incentivize their participation more holistically, and to develop new methodologies that can keep pace with this tech. So it's not just funding the old school research, it's funding a whole new ecosystem of how we think about this, as well as market signals and incentives. We need ways to better communicate what's working for who and how. Outcomes-based contracting is a fabulous approach, and they're scaling as fast as they can. So we need to figure out and give them more momentum, or give that modality more momentum and make it easier to access.
Yeah, and I would say walking away from today, if you don't do anything else, shift your conversation. Shift from what is being delivered to what outcomes or what results do we want to see for kids. Make sure that's the center of every single conversation. And the other thing that I would urge you not to do, outcomes-based contracting is not a silver bullet. Like I was a child in a candy store when I found out about it. I wanted to do it for everything. Start small. Start small and build from there.
Awesome. So I heard more funding for infrastructure as well as research itself, more teacher support, outcome-based contracting, and even just the mindset that goes into outcomes-based contracting showing up earlier in these conversations, more partnerships between the different puzzle pieces to make that more of a coherent, as well as better market signals about quality, right? So a lot of great suggestions there. I think the folks in this room are well positioned to help us make progress on this. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all for being on this panel. I would love to just reinforce the narrative that EdTech doesn't work is too simple. EdTech can work, but only if we get serious about building evidence sooner, focusing on coherence and implementation, and making sure that purchasing decisions are connected to evidence. And no single entity can close these gaps alone. It's about a collaboration across the ecosystem. So we really invite you to continue the conversation as you go on today. I also wanted to share this link to a compendium of essays from including myself and Dacia and our other Think Forward fellows with SERPI. I think Robin's in the room somewhere. Yes, great. So the QR code's there. I also encourage you to check out the Center for Outcomes-Based Contracting website. They have a ton of amazing resources on there, as well as LeanLab's R&D work and Course Mojo's great evidence that Dacia was talking about earlier. A lot of things to follow up on. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of Summit.